Hello, 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 and welcome, good evening, and all. As you can see, although some of you may have seen my video today, I am not only had a haircut, but a nice shave as well. I'll tell you what, when you've had a shave as close to the one I have had today, I've been literally just doing this all day today because it's been such a good shave. I've had the full works done today. I went to a very local Turkish barber, and I must say I love ever since the pandemic hit. I've been waiting to go there, and I was not disappointed. I absolutely loved it. Oh no, it's Lex Luthor. But oh yeah, yeah, I absolutely love going to the place purely because the guy there does such a really good like wet shave with the cutthroat razor and the hot towel. It does everything. He's so good about it. He's so skilled with it. And it was so good to be back in the chair after almost 2 years of not being there. The only problem was for those of guys out there who have this similar problem, I'm sure I'm not alone. When you have a wet shave in particular, your hair follicles tend to get used to different shaves. And because again during the pandemic I've reverted to like my electric shaver, the second I had a wet shave with it, literally, honestly, it like he'd cut my throat. I was bleeding, like it was literally pulling out all these hairs and stuff like that. And just again, because my skin was just not used to having that razor around to me. But again, like I say, after a couple of times, it'll just subside and it'll just be all fine and dandy, and be able to go shoo, 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 straight again like that. But anyway, that's enough of my my shave adventures. Anyway, who have we got in chat this evening? Anyway, Nudisol, hello to you. Cathal O'Gorman, hello to you. Evening to you. Colin Thompson, hello to you. Chatty Rat, hello to you. Simon says, "Babyface Nelson, indeed." English Viking, you got your money's worth. I really did. Honestly, I've said this before to them. They charge far too cheap for what they're asking. Like, the full shave and haircut cost me 12 quid. And I'm like, you're charging far too little for that. So yeah, far too little. But yeah, if I just start going like this during the stream, you know why I'm doing it. Because of my nice close shave. Michael, good evening to you. Did they set your ears on fire? No, they're still there. Gatgeld, hello to you. Number 3, hello to you as well. So hello, good evening again, one and all, to everyone who joins us, and those who are again sitting around secretly watching but not commentating. Hello to you as well. Always a good evening and always a pleasure to see you all, as always. So let's begin then, shall we? Because so we have to once again talk about Ukraine. Why? Well, purely for one reason straight away. There are a lot of people on the left somehow not understanding this situation, like completely not understanding this situation at all. Ukraine, a sovereign country who has already had one piece of its territory annexed, is now finding itself under yet more Russian aggression, trying to take yet more of its territory by, again, Russia not only influencing its politics, but by funding separatist movements as well. And now basically surrounding Ukraine with troops, because as I keep on trying to get through to you all, Ukraine at the moment is sort of surrounded. Not only are there Russian troops on the border with Ukraine, but there are troops in Belarus, another country, and there are troops ready in Crimea. That's 3 avenues of potential attack into Ukraine. as much as people on the left want to say that the US is inflaming tensions, the US is inflaming tensions, it's all the US's fault for some reason, and NATO expansion to the east was wrong, even though, again, let's point it out. Let's point this out. All these countries joined NATO for a reason. And generally tonight, if there is anything that you take away from this stream or anything away from this conversation, ask yourself this question. Why? And this is important. Why does Ukraine want to join NATO? If you cannot seriously tackle that question seriously and give yourself an honest answer, that the whole reason that they want to do it is because the Ukrainian people feels threatened by Russia, whose president calls Ukraine a part of Russia and the Ukrainian people the little lost Russian tribe, then you just don't seem to understand this. Then, you're lost at this point. I'm sorry. Reality is a harsh mistress. I'm on the left. I don't like war as much as any other person on the left either. But when we have this situation, and trust me, we're going to get into some interesting situations tonight, because not only tonight are we going to cover the Stop the War Coalition's statement on the Ukraine crisis, we are also going to go over Russell Brand's video on this as well. So maybe we'll get to Wales trialing universal credit, not universal credit, universal basic income. Hopefully, that is what we'll get to. So hopefully we'll have that, and we'll at least manage to finish off with this. And the big problem most lefty people have is, oh, we said we'd never expand NATO eastward. That was never ever put in writing. There was no treaty, no nothing. The door was always left open so that if these countries ever wanted to join NATO, then they could. And during the 1990s and early 2000s, these countries did. Why? Because they had a constant fear, not only currently as part of that time, but historically as well. We've just had, again, someone in chat from Romania. You've got to remember, in places like Romania, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, the Baltic states, so Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, all have deep-rooted into their national history the part of their national identity, and part of their uniting and coming together of the country was that sense of the suffering that Russia put them through. And by the way, if you're on the left, this suffering that a lot of these countries are feeling and feel very much aggrieved about Russia is the exact same way a lot of our former colonies feel aggrieved as well. So, just because of this, it's, yeah, we're about to see a lot of dumb, ladies and gentlemen. And like I say, I genuinely do apologize. But when we get to Russell Brand and the fact that Russell Brand is parroting the exact same I kid you not, the exact same talking points as Alex Jones, the US conspiracy theorist. I think you have a problem. You know, I would hope, chat, that if I ever got to the stage of where I was parroting like Alex Jones talking points and not like jokingly, but actually using them as a statement of fact, using them to back up my positions, I would hope, you would try to help me and at least realize that I was wrong here and make me see the error of my ways. So we're going to go into this tonight. But first of all, we are going to go onto the Stop the War Coalition's page. This is their official statement about the Ukraine crisis. And we're going to go into this statement and explain why these people, and especially the Stop the War Coalition in this case, and especially about Ukraine, is absolutely 100% wrong. But before we do get into that, please do remember while you are here to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. That does help out the channel massively, and it helps out the stream, gets more people in. And the more people we have in, the more bigger chats we can have. So let's get on with this then, shall we? So, whoop, there we go. Bigger screen for you all. So this is, like I say, this is the Stop the War statement on the crisis over Ukraine. So, their headline title for this is Stop the War believes that Russia and Ukraine should reach a diplomatic settlement of the tensions between them. I am not against that. I am for Ukraine and Russia trying to reach a diplomatic agreement here. I am for Russia and Ukraine coming to a diplomatic agreement that makes sure that, a war does not happen. I am for that. I want to make sure that that is crystal clear laid out here. But as we're going to get into here, Russia is claiming that this agreement already exists in the form of the Minsk agreement. And we are going to get into why the Minsk agreement is so wrong and is not a diplomatic solution to this, because it is incredibly a one-sided agreement, heavily favoring that of Russia. So let's get into this then, shall we? So, Stop the War opposes any war over Ukraine. I agree with it there, Stop the War. I do oppose any war over Ukraine. I think it would be incredibly bad thing not only to happen to Ukraine, but its people, and probably for the rest of the other Eastern European countries as well as the rest of Europe. I do not want war to happen. But the way in which they are going about this is so bad. It is so bad. And believes that this crisis should be settled on the basis, which I want to remember this point, which recognizes the right of the Ukrainian people to self-determination. I agree. I think the right here, and this is the big point where a lot of people on the left seem to really be ignoring this, the actual right of self-determination by the Ukrainian people. I said at the beginning, if there's one question that you can generally answer and honestly answer this to yourself, then congratulations, you have learned from this stream. You do not need to watch the rest of it. I give you leave to go, but you may stay if you wish. I would like you to stay because, again, it's good to have people watching. And that question is simply this: why does Ukraine want to join NATO? if you can seriously not answer that question honestly and truthfully to yourself with the information that I'll go through today, then you are falling into some very, very imperialistic notions of that small countries do not deserve any democratic or independent legitimacy. Because unfortunately, a lot of people on the left are just completely disagreeing with any of that for Ukraine. And that is incredibly sad to see. It really is. And especially coming from Stop the War Coalition as well. So, again, this crisis should be settled. We'll go through it again. This crisis should be settled on the basis which recognizes the right of the Ukrainian people to self-determination and addresses Russia's security concerns. So, what are Russia's security concerns? Essentially, it doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO. But Ukraine wants to join NATO. And this isn't just the Ukrainian government wants to join NATO. Overwhelmingly, when you look at the polls, the people of Ukraine wants to join NATO. It's pretty clear what wants to go down there. It is pretty clear that the people of Ukraine, not only do they want to join things like the European Economic Area, which will again eventually lead them to probably joining the European Union, but they want to again become a more democratic country. And again, I'm not saying Ukraine is a perfect country. Yes, there is a lot of corruption going on in Ukraine, but they are trying to tackle that. They are trying to take steps to tackle that. They are improving on that. So let's not, sway away from that. So that is the serious thing here. As I've said before, if you deny that, you are denying a sovereign country's democratic legitimacy. And I thought that's what we were on the left about here. People having democratic rights and democratic legitimacy here. So, our focus, of course, is on policies of the British government which have poured oil on the fire throughout all this episode. In taking this position, we do not endorse the nature or the conduct of either Russia or the Ukrainian regimes. What exactly has the Ukrainian regime done to earn your ire? It basically does not want to get invaded. That is the position of the Ukrainian regime here. We do not want to get invaded because it will be very bad for us. It will probably be very bad for the rest of Europe as well. No one wants that. No one wants that. And true, we have seen some very diplomatic statements of the past week. Bear in mind, Russia threatened nuclear war this week. Not the US, not Britain, not France or Germany, Russia. So when you say who's been pouring fuel on the oil on the fire, it has been Russia. Russia has threatened nuclear war over this. Why are people on the left not getting this or not understanding this? And here's the thing. Someone just brought up neutrality like Finland. That's not true. Both Finland and Sweden have what are called trigger agreements. That if Russia were to attack them as a country, then they would immediately join NATO. That is their agreement with NATO. Now, could we set something up like this with Ukraine? That they are not a full member of NATO, but should they be attacked or invaded by Russia, then that trigger goes off and they are then allowed to join NATO. I don't see any problem with that. I think that solves a lot of issues. I think that even solves Putin's issue of Ukraine not being allowed to join NATO. And as I've said this before, Putin wants to push back NATO, but in none of these agreements does he talk about pulling Russia back from some of his military strong arming things that he's done over the years. That is the situation here. And I'm sorry, you can't cut it either way. Russia here is acting in a very, very imperialist manner, wanting to essentially set up spheres of influence, which basically would mean that Ukraine would, in all but name, be controlled by Russia. That's the problem here. Now, of course, it doesn't help, of course, that we are currently sending over Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, heavyweights when it comes to negotiation. So I do agree that, them pouring fuel on the fire is not helpful. Maybe instead, what should have happened is that rather than them try to snipe from the sidelines, that Boris or Mr. Johnson here should have joined with Macron and the new German Chancellor to have talks called the Normandy Conference. That would have sent a far more powerful message than currently what they are doing at the moment. Something, again, Stop the War here has said we want a diplomatic solution. That is a diplomatic solution. I would far more better for Stop the War here to be calling for them to join in those conversations and have a one united voice on this, rather than Boris and Liz here trying to snipe from the sidelines, trying to gain some sort of diplomatic legitimacy. And again, this, by the way, all comes back to Brexit. This, again, shows you how far the UK has fallen in global diplomatic terms, where the French Prime Minister got a 6-7 hour face-to-face meeting with Putin, where Boris Johnson got a 5-minute phone call. And Liz Truss didn't even meet with Putin, despite her fancy pics of her in what is it, the Yushchenko hat? Is it Yushchenko? Or the fur hat that she wore? So anyway, let's continue this then. The British government has failed. The British government has again talked up the threat of war continually. Again, because there is strong evidence that that could be a potential case. Still is today. Russia has said, "Oh, we're going to pull back some troops." NATO today, their Secretary General has said, even though Russia has said that it's going to pull back some troops, it has seen no evidence of this pullback of troops occurring. To the point where the Ukraine government has asked it to stop. Yes, it's not just asked the UK government here about this, it's also asked at the US government as well, because it has been damaging the economy of the Ukraine, especially when all of the countries at the moment are trying to recover from the recession caused the pandemic. It's not good when this starts going around because, again, war is not good for business, and this has affected the Ukrainian economy when it's trying to recover. So, unlike the French and German governments, it has advanced no proposals for a diplomatic solution to the crisis and has contributed only to the saber rattling. As I've just said there, it should have joined with the French and German governments to have a united front on this. Indeed, the Defense Secretary Ben Wallace has even accused those of seeking a peaceful statement of preparing another Munich. And unfortunately, this puts me in a very bad position of agreeing with Ben Wallace, because what he's talking about, preparing another Munich, is the Minsk Treaty, which we will get into in a moment. But put it this way, all you need to know about the Minsk Treaty is an incredibly one-sided deal that overwhelmingly favors the Russian overwhelmingly favors Russia and Putin. And we'll get into that in a moment. So instead, the British government has sent arms to Ukraine and deployed further troops to Eastern Europe, moves which serve no purpose other than inflaming tensions and indicating disdain for Russian concerns. Again, Russian concerns are, we want to set up a spheres of influence, and NATO is stopping us from achieving that game. You know? Putin can't establish or re-establish, again, as he has said publicly in many speeches, and reclaim the true Russian soil, which he describes as the borders of the USSR, and again, re-establish those Cold War allies and many of those Russia's natural allies, as he says, and essentially re-establish his own version of the European Economic Area, basically based on not them all coming together, having a parliament, sitting around and discussing, but no, Russia gets to dictate what these economic terms are, and if you don't like it, well, tough. Again, Russian strategic aims right there, people. Stop the War Coalition here, right here, saying we should give in to Russian imperialism. It goes beyond the pale sometimes. It really, really does in this. Really, really does. It has also declared that Ukraine has a sovereign right to join NATO. Indeed, it does have a sovereign right to join NATO. Now, of course, NATO can obviously turn around and say, we don't want you to join, which again would be up to NATO to decide. But Ukraine has every single right, if it wants to join NATO. And again, there is an application process for it to go through. And again, NATO may very well even reject that. Remember, at this point, even before all this, the idea of Ukraine joining NATO was already said, we don't want Ukraine to join at this moment in time. So at the moment, Putin is pushing for something which we know is not going to happen. So this is indeed incredibly bad. But it's what do we do about this? It is very bad. But where do we go from here? That's the big question. Hopefully not war. Like I say, I don't want war. No one does. Oh, by the way, Catherine Larkin, if you are so concerned about my flag waving and this current crisis, I invite you to come on. I invite you to come on. If you really do want to come on, I have no problems offering you that invite to come on and tell me how I'm wrong. But I will tell you why you are wrong in this case as well. If you really want to come on, I will extend that. That offer has been extended. If you want to come on, you're more than welcome to. So, anyway, where were we? Yeah, so it is also declared that Ukraine has a sovereign right to join NATO when no such right exists to join it or any other military alliance. They've got mixed up idea here with sovereignty. Sovereignty here, as we know all too well in the UK, what this term means, meaning that the country gets to make the decisions, and overwhelmingly in the Ukraine there is a big push to join NATO. Why? Because of the threat of Russian aggression. It's why Poland joined, it's why Romania joined, it's why the Baltic states joined as well, it's why Hungary and the Czech Republic also joined as well. So, Britain needs to change its policy and start working for peace, not confrontation. Okay, if you want to work towards peace, fine. But the ones offering the confrontation here is not the West, it's not NATO, it's not Ukraine, it's Russia. And more specifically, by the way, Putin. Stop the War believes that Russia and Ukraine should reach a diplomatic settlement, a settlement of the tensions between them on the basis of the Minsk II agreement already signed by both sides. The Minsk II agreement here, first of all, is not an equal treaty. It overwhelmingly favors Russia. So what does this do? Minsk essentially basically says that the Donbass and Luhansk regions, again, two of the regions which are again have been very much destabilized by very much the by Russia, by Putin funding separatist movements in these two regions. Currently, these separatist movements do not fully control these regions. And what would happen under the Minsk II agreement is that these two areas would become zones of special organization. Basically, these zones would be given over to control of the People's Militia. The People's Militia that are backed by Russian funding, backed by Russian separatist groups, that essentially do not hold all the regions currently and would essentially hand those regions fully over to these groups. Like the full two regions will be basically handed over to these groups. And what do you think is going to happen? Well, remember what happened in Crimea, where bar to this happening, of course, you had a a poll done about what the Crimean people in that region wanted, only about 41% actually said they wanted to reunite with Russia. A month later, that very, very dodgy referendum happens, and 95.5% of the population of Crimea suddenly say they want to join with Russia. Strange how within a month it went from 41% to 95.5%. What do you think is going to happen when these, again, under the Minsk agreement, where these two regions get handed over to Russian-backed separatist groups? What do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you think is going to happen? There's another going to be a referendum. And magically, these two areas are going to vote overwhelmingly to rejoin Russia. And yet again, Ukraine is going to lose territory to an imperialist power that is currently the Russian state. That is literally what's going to happen. That is the Minsk agreement. That is why Ukraine does not agree to it. That is why it is saying it doesn't want to just negotiate with Russia by itself. It wants international agreements and cooperation on this so that Russia doesn't just do what it does in Crimea again and just go, yoink, that's ours now. That's essentially what's going to happen here. And you are right. It could be split up into two buffer states. You are right. That could happen as well. So these are incredibly, incredibly bad times here for Russia on this. It's not going to end well, unfortunately, for most of the Ukraine people, unfortunately. But bizarrely, Stop the War supports this very one-sided peace agreement. And I've just said and laid out the situation of what's going to happen if these two regions suddenly get handed over to the People's Militia, again, heavily backed by Putin and Russia. What do you think is going to happen to these regions when they get handed over to them? They're just going to go, oh, well, we're part of Russia now. Whoops. Whoops. It also believes NATO should call a halt to its eastward expansion and commit to a new security deal for Europe which meets the needs of all states and peoples. NATO shouldn't. NATO is a military alliance here of countries. If a country wants to join NATO, then it should have every right to join NATO. It is then up to NATO itself whether those whether that country joins NATO. And like I say, we have agreements with Finland and Sweden of like the trigger agreements, where if they get invaded by Russia or something like that, then they immediately become members and the whole thing triggers. We've had Putin this week saying, again, which has been parroted by people on the left as well, shockingly, but here you go. that the only reason Ukraine wants to join NATO is because it wants to get Crimea back. It will trigger Article 5, again, shared defense. Again, keeping with the NATO credo, you attack one, you attack all, and essentially start a war. Ukraine has been very, very clear, even though it wants Crimea back and says that, Crimea is part of its territory. The world pretty much agrees on that again, Ukraine is part of that Crimea is part of Ukraine, and it is not part of Russia, and that the Russian annexation of Crimea was wrong. It knows that it cannot go to war to achieve that aim. So it ain't going to do that. And people saying that are literally using the words from Putin's very own mouth. We have leftists literally parroting the very words of the authoritarian leader of Russia. That, to me, is incredibly, incredibly depressing. We refute the idea that NATO is a defensive alliance. It is a defensive alliance. It is set up to be a defensive alliance. And believe its record in Afghanistan. NATO wasn't overwhelmingly in Afghanistan, I believe it was at the time. It didn't have a massive presence. It was mainly American led at the time. Again, I don't believe NATO was fully a NATO commitment. Yugoslavia, as anyone will tell you, was incredibly messy. The breakup of Yugoslavia was basically a devolution into civil wars to which no one got right. And there was a lot of genocide and ethnic cleansing that went on that NATO forces, unfortunately, stood by as that went on. And that is a very, very regrettable chapter in NATO's history. But in no way does, again, there being anything way that NATO was an aggressive force in Yugoslavia. Libya. I don't believe there's any NATO action there. But again, I'm willing to be proven wrong if that's the case. But overwhelmingly, I don't think they've done anything overtly aggressive there. So, and Libya, over the last generation, not to mention the US-British attack on Iraq, that clearly proves otherwise. Again, US-British attack, not NATO attack on Iraq. Again, I disagree with your statement there. NATO is a defensive alliance. It acts defensively. There are things built into the NATO treaty which, again, pretty much stop it from being an aggressive force. We support efforts to reach a new arms control agreement in Europe, a move towards nuclear disarmament across the continent. We engaged the entire anti-war movement to unite on the basis of challenging the British government's aggressive posturing and direct its campaign to end above all. I completely agree with Stop the Wars statements there. I completely disagree with how that happened. Catherine, you got the offer. Come on, talk about this. Don't parrot propaganda in my chat. Come on, and I'll challenge you face to face. The offer's there, Catherine. The offer's there. So that's the stop the war here. And the Stop the War coalition here, as much as I agree with them to the point that we don't want war, I'm a leftist, I don't want war, I don't like war. But the problem is here is that this should not come to this level. But unfortunately, the problem here is there are currently Russian troops not only on the border of the Russia-Ukraine border, but in Belarus and sat currently waiting in Crimea. Those are 3 avenues of attack which they will use if an invasion goes off. Again, I ask anyone to seriously consider this question. Why does Ukraine want to join NATO? Why did these other Eastern European countries who border with Russia want to join NATO? If you seriously cannot answer that question, there's no help for you. There's no help for you at all. So let's stop the war. On to on to Russell Brand. Oh me, oh my. Hold on a second, because I've forgotten to put my earphones in. So 1 second. Ugh. Let me get my earphones in. Should have done this before, but never mind. There we go. All right, here we go. Right. So hopefully.
War! What is it good for? Business, the media, the government? Let's have one then.
Did everyone hear that? Did everyone hear that? Is the sound ready? Is the sound good? Have we got good sound? Let me just check. Hopefully. There we go. So we are now about to listen to Russell Brand's poor takes on this Russia-Ukraine war. So here we go. Hold on to your hats, people. It's about to get rough.
You know, I read the comments, right? Loads of you in the comments are saying, Russell, do a video on what's happening between Russia and the Ukraine. Now, we know that there are complex relationships between Russia and America, historic Cold War and post-Cold War relationships. There are complicated relationships at play between Russia and the Ukraine, obviously. And I reckon one of the reasons we feel like it's difficult to understand what's actually happening is because we know that the mainstream media benefits in terms of ratings and therefore in terms of advertising revenue from there being a war. And we know that the military industrial complex benefits from there being a war in terms of
No way, Russell. Really? Companies that produce weapons benefit from war. What a shocker. what a shocker. What an absolute shocker. Oh my. Oh, by the way, Paul Armstrong, for saying that I'm siding with Trudeau over the truckers. Bear in mind, today, just a couple of days ago, the truckers' funds were hacked, and we found out where most of those donations are coming from. They're coming from right wingers and right leaning people in America. Most of them are. About what, 56%, I think it was. Interesting, that. Very interesting. Also, why does the truckers union in Canada not support the strike? Paul, if you want to come on and you want to talk about this, my door's open. But I suggest, like Catherine, you're not going to. Put up or shut up, Paul. The time's now. And yeah, you are right, Wilson. Is Sky News a big beneficiary of the Donbass war then? Exactly. That statement in itself is so stupid. If there is going to be like a war, of course news organizations are going to cover it. Right now, technically, because again, Russell Brand's channel here is monetized, is Russell Brand profiting from the Ukraine conflict? Is Russell Brand a war profiteer for covering the news? Again, such a dumb statement, and we've already barely begun.
of sales of munitions, arms, and various other facilities. So how, in such a complex machine of duplicity and obfuscation, are we meant to understand the actual facts? Well, let's do our best in this video to break some of that stuff down. As 100 religious, social justice, and veterans groups demand that President Biden stop escalating tensions over Ukraine, the White House continued to warn of a potential imminent invasion.
Yes, because there are troops at the border. I wonder if Russell here is going to be honest enough to admit that. Because I've seen a lot of leftists. I've seen a lot of leftists. I mean a lot. Denying even the fact that there is this Russian buildup, not only at the border with Russia, Ukraine, but in again, Belarus, a separate country yet ally of Russia, and also in Crimea as well. Kind of interesting, that. Kind of interesting if Russell will be honest about that or not.
People keep saying this war's going to happen. How can you schedule wars? There's going to be a war Wednesday. See you there for a war. That the tension shouldn't be escalated either, should they, by Joe Biden? Whatever you think of Joe Biden, and I read the comments, so I know what you think of Joe Biden. He certainly was elected on a kind of platform of no more of these unnecessary wars. And you feel like, don't you, if you...
How was Biden meant to predict this? How was Biden meant to predict this Russia-Ukraine crisis? Not only that, if Russia does invade what's he gonna do? Oh, Paul, are you up for this? Okay, then, Paul. Do you follow me on Twitter? I don't know if you do. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Send me a message, and I'll send you the invite link. But I'll give you this warning now. Anything against TOS, anything like that, and you are immediately gone. No ifs, ands, or buts. You are gone. There's no. I'm not having anything like that. Anything like that, and you are immediately gone. So follow me on Twitter, message me on Twitter, and we'll have a talk. I'm sure this is going to be very, very fun. Remember, the topic here is about Ukraine conflict. That's what you were deciding to talk about, Paul. So that's what we're going to talk about. I ain't interested in you talking about anything else at the moment. Tick, 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 Paul. Anyway, we'll come back in a minute and check. But anyway, we'll go back to Russell Brand's comments here.
You support someone like Biden, like, don't escalate this war then, particularly not if it is for the kind of interest that I've already lied, economic interest, media interest. If that's what's behind it, then stop it. During Friday's White House.
So is the media not meant to cover a war? It kind of is news, so I don't see how they can't not cover it. And again, Russell Brand here, technically covering this, his channel's monetized. Is Russell Brand a war profiteer then? And of course, companies that create weapons are obviously going to profit off war. Shock horror. That's pretty much the nature of what they do.
Press briefing, Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, said that Russian military action could begin any day now. Even as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky discourages panic and downplays the idea that a Russian invasion is imminent, American officials are portraying armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine as inevitable. And
that is the potential situation. That is the potential situation here. Russia has troops at the border. Why have they got troops at the border? Why are we seeing them set up infrastructure to be able to support an invasion? Whoops, guess this is just what they do now. Whoops. Oh, this is so ridiculously stupid. So ridiculously stupid. But this is what we're seeing. And of course, Ukraine cannot withstand a Russian invasion. We've already seen what happened last time Russia decided to have a pop at Ukraine. They didn't go too well for them. So I think them having that might be pretty necessary for them. Paul, you don't have a Twitter account. Well, that's how I can only send you the link, unfortunately. So better make a Twitter account then, Paul. And yes, while there has been a lot of build-up, and of course the Ukrainian president isn't happy about that, the reason he isn't happy about that, by the way, is because the Ukrainian economy has suffered. It has taken a hit because of these, again, worries about war. And again, war is not good for business. And especially at a time where a lot of countries are trying desperately, desperately here to avoid to rebuild up after the recession that been caused by the pandemic. Not really helpful if again you start saying there's going to be a war, there's going to be a war, there's going to be a war, and again the papers in Ukraine are pretty much saying the same thing. There's very much likely there could be a war. I don't see Russell having a go at the Ukraine media about this.
US military support of Ukraine as necessary. He's the actual president. No, I don't think there's anything to worry about. It's okay. No need for war. No, there's.
What about Russell? His recent comments that if Russia invades, Ukraine will defend itself. Again, Russell here is being incredibly dishonest and not using the full context of that quote that by the Ukrainian president in its full potential. The full quote was that they needed to cool down and stop talking about war because, again, he felt that it was inflaming tensions, but it was also hurting Ukraine's economy at a time when it was trying to recover from the recession caused by the pandemic. Shockingly enough, that's what he said. But then again, what about the comments where he said, if Ukraine is attacked, we will defend ourselves. We will defend ourselves from any aggression. Notice he said any aggression because he didn't want to say Russian aggression. But he also has said very on later this week, Russian aggression. Is Brand going to talk about those comments made by the Ukrainian Prime Minister?
It's going to be a war, Vladimir. Essentially, that's a pincer movement, isn't it? It's inevitable. Our support is necessary. That means there's no decision to be made.
Brand again is framing the situation as if it is the US forcing Russia to invade Ukraine. No, that's not how it works, Russell. That's not how it works at all.
They're talking about it as if it's meteorological, as if it's just a weather system that's happening that you can't do anything about. And obviously we have.
It's not, they're not talking about it in that way because they talk about it in that way because they have credible information that it is very likely Russia could attack. There are troops at the border. Literally, Ukraine is surrounded. There is infrastructure being built up to support an invasion. And somehow, all of this is being puppet mastered by Biden and the US to force Russia to invade Ukraine.
Have no choice but to support them. And I suppose a side effect of that is that we will make loads and loads of money. Now, I'm not saying there aren't complex issues at stake. I'm in no position to make such a verdict. I don't know enough about it. But I know that as a discerning viewer,
You that is everything you need to hear from Russell Brand. He doesn't know anything about it. Um, um,
media, and I know that's what you are too, that it raises questions. Journalist Joe Gill wrote that in the 21st century, the media war is a critical element of any pre-war planning, and this appears to be reaching its crescendo. Oh, so that's the bit we're in now. We're in the...
So what's the media supposed to do? What is the media meant to do? Say nothing? There is a potential war brewing here. And again, what's the media supposed to do? Just say nothing about it? Should the media just journalists go to work every day and just say nothing bad happened today because us reporting on this potential situation might make things worse?
The bit now where they prime us for a war. That's the bit where you sort of like, if you just ask someone on the street, is there going to be a war? Well, it seems inevitable. War is necessary. Where'd you get that? Television.
How about the fact that Russia's put troops at the border and surrounded Ukraine? Any talk of that? Any talk of that? Is he going to be honest and talk about that situation? Don't think so.
Narratives repeated in the Western media are so thunderingly pro-Ukrainian and anti-Putin that it's hard to extract from the simplistic framing the complex nature of the conflict.
Yes. The West, and especially the Western media, is pro-Ukrainian and anti-Putin because Ukraine is being threatened with invasion by Putin and Russia. And let's just say this is also being put forward again by Edward Snowden here. Just to show you who he's quoting there. But there you go.
By talking up the inevitability of a war in Ukraine against Russia, Western intelligence agencies and their media outliers are implanting the idea that war has already started. He continued, noting that Bloomberg even accidentally announced that Russia had invaded Ukraine. Bad news, everyone!
Mistakes happen in reporting. Happens all the time. I'm not going to judge them on that. Russell will, very disingenuously. I'll say that now. This is so bizarre. I mean, you are right here, Joan and Kate. What if Ukraine was positioning itself to annex parts of Russia? Would Brand be speaking out and being pro-Russian like we are being pro-Ukrainian here, against, speaking out against the Ukrainian aggression to annex parts of Russia? No, he's absolutely not, because he's being disingenuous. He's already admitted at the start of this video he knows nothing about this.
Russia has invaded the Ukraine. Oh, sorry, that's not till tomorrow. We're still making a few missiles. Noting that the US and NATO are pouring in high-tech weaponry and training up Ukraine's armed forces, making it a much more military capable foe. They've always...
Yes, because it's been threatened with invasion. And last time this happened, the Ukrainian military took a kicking. So they want to make sure that if it happens again, that at least they don't get as much as a kicking as last time. Yeah, same here, Mo Green. This is the situation that we are in. There seems to be a bizarre. There's a lot of lefties out there who are backing Russia in this crisis, and it is so bizarre. Again, when you look at the situation, Ukraine has done nothing except exist. And you only have to look at the multiple quotes that Putin has made about the fact that he says, Ukraine is part of Russia, that Ukrainian people and Russian people are the same. The fact that he has said and used very Tsarist imperial language, saying that the Ukrainians are like the lost little Russian tribe and that they need to return to their home tribe, time and time again. Not only, again, the annexation of Crimea, the interfering in Ukrainian elections. Again, it goes on and on and on.
Always been doing this thing, America, and they popping over to places. Okay, guys, do you need some training? Why? What's going to happen? There's going to be a war. Why? Because we said so. Get ready for the war. From where the Russians are sitting, the deployment of billions of dollars worth of new US and UK military hardware on its borders is a sign of escalation rather than defense.
And those weapons would not need to be there if Russia was not acting aggressively towards Ukraine. Those are why they are there. And bear in mind, it's not the US and the UK twisting Ukraine's arm saying, you are going to have these weapons. It is Ukraine asking the US and the UK for this military hardware because they are worried about an impending invasion from Russia. So many leftists. It comes right back to the issue we had at the start of this video. So many people on the left, bizarrely, are seeming to be completely discounting the fact of Russian, of Ukrainian, not only democracy, but democratic legitimacy, and even its own territorial sovereignty. As if that just doesn't matter and just goes out the window. Again, those weapons would not need to be there if, again, when there are Russian troops literally surrounding Ukraine.
So, of course, we are presented with information along the lines of, hey, it's necessary in terms of defense to get all this military hardware over there defensively. But from a Russian perspective, if we were watching a Russian news outlet, what they would say is, no, what that is escalation. You're bringing weaponry into a neighboring territory with whom we have historic conflict. And
historic conflict? Historic conflict? Russell, who started those historic conflicts? Oh my. Yeah, and again, as Jerning K repoints this out, if you rephrase this as, again, from where the Ukrainians are sitting, billions of dollars of Russian hardware has turned up at its border. Is that a sign of aggression and not defense? You can say the exact same thing here. It's incredibly bizarre, but that's the situation that we're in. And that's the situation where many people on the left are bizarrely just incredibly not only pro-Russia, but pro-Russian imperialism, to just go yoink and take these potential parts of Ukraine, especially the Donbass and probably Luhansk regions. Again, as we've talked about, Minsk 2 basically hands over those two states to the Russian-backed People's Militia, which will then ultimately probably hand over those two regions over to Russia in probably an incredibly very suspicious referendum where about 95.5% suddenly seem to favor wanting to join Russia, when literally only a month before only about 41% wanted to join, like that was the case in Crimea. I really want to know what happens in like a couple of months' time. Like if this de-escalates, or Russia goes ahead with its invasion, very obviously, where like most of these leftists are going to fall on this situation. I really want to know where they're going to fall about that. Really.
You can certainly see that perspective. I know there are other people with much more experience with military history than me that go, no, you're being naive. America has these, but all of those ideas, if you ask me, are being currently amplified by institutions and organizations that benefit from a war.
There are people in Finland in chat. I know this, we've seen some. Why doesn't Russia have an issue with Finland owning US made and UK made military hardware? That seems a bit weird to me that they have a problem with Ukraine owning such hardware, particularly when it's a sign of wanting to imminently invade it. Probably because Ukraine owning such hardware would probably make their invasion a lot harder. And like I say, at this point, I think Putin was hoping for essentially a very, very quick land grab. Again, some people have mentioned in chat, Russia cannot afford a long sustained war. It wants a very, very quick war that it can just be done and over with in like literally like a couple of months. That's what it wants. But now Ukraine having those more modern weapons might make that war maybe a bit more of a problem than it was before.
Wouldn't you feel more comfortable that you had a great understanding of the current escalation if you were able to read a disclaimer like, no one will financially benefit from this war, and like the media news?
That doesn't make any sense. People always have benefited from war, going all the way back to like like Bronze Age conflicts between like Greek city states. People have always profited from war in one way, shape, or another. How, again, that is such a naive way of, not even naive. It's not even naive way of looking at it. It's a dumb way of interpretation looking at this.
News media was saying we're going to report on this in a sensible way rather than like day to day like this.
What do you think of the idea of a war now? I'll take that as a yes.
That's it, Chris. It's war. This is a war.
That's it. Yes, it's war.
Oh, by the way, this is The Day Today, a very, very good satirical comedy program, but no one is announcing war like this. We have journalists covering this again from day to day in multiple newspapers, looking at it, the situation. Now, of course, you could look at the most extreme version of all this, the Daily Express, which we've talked about before, how ridiculous and over crazy the Daily Express is and how nationalistic the Daily Express is. You could say that is probably the equivalent of what we are seeing here on the Day Today. But there are other newspapers who are, again, just reporting the news and what's going on. We'll just skip forward. But
those Baudrillard's essays, the Iraq War didn't happen, there is no Iraq War. And what he's essentially saying is that war becomes such a media spectacle that it's actually deracinated from the reality of the situation. And I know that sounds like a complex philosophical notion, but just consider this. I'm not in the Ukraine.
This is not a complex philosophical conversation, Russell. It is actual real world events that are happening.
I'm not in Russia. Some of you will be and have been, but you don't bloody well know what's going on over there. All you know is what you're told. And what you're told is the result of certain interests. It's showing.
My God, this is exactly how a conspiracy theorist thinks. This is exactly how a conspiracy theorist thinks. Like, the piece of evidence so far that Russell Brand has chosen to present, how does he know that the interest that those piece of evidence represents are not going to benefit in any way, shape, or form from the events of covering that? You always, this is like one of the worst conversations, and I can tell you, back in the day, this is like one of the worst conversations to have with a conspiracy theorist about what makes a source like a valid source. Honestly, it's an absolute nightmare because conspiracy theorists will always play their incredible trump card, which is, I don't believe that source for X reason, or it's a government source. I don't trust that source. And they will, any source you present to them which disproves their point is always untrustworthy in some way, shape, or form. And Russell Brand is employing the exact same talking point I have heard conspiracy theorist after conspiracy theorist put forward, from justifying things like 9/11 was an inside job to Kennedy was assassinated by the CIA, to any possible number of conspiracy theorists you can think of.
That mainstream media and corporate interests operate on their own strata, and their function is to make you be compliant and passive so that you don't go, what's actually happening here? We're kept in a state of peculiar delirium by the inundation of non-data to the point we don't even know what's real. So
what is news then, Russell? What is news? And who do we trust? Do we trust you? And after your initial statements, and I know that your channel is monetized, Russell, so are you also not profiteering from the Ukraine conflict? Makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense.
confusion about Russia and Ukraine is part of the process, because if you actually understood it, you would go, well, why is that happening? Whose business is that? Who's doing it? Who benefits? That's what critical thinking would be in this instance. But critical thinking ain't facilitated by a media and corporate environment that continually sends out hypnotic messaging that disconnects you from the actual reality. The particular kind of crisis story.
The actual reality here is at the moment that Ukraine has been surrounded by Russian forces, not only in its border across the Ukraine-Russian border, but in Belarus and in Crimea. There's also been, again, a buildup of troops. NATO has sent a request to Russia to explain why it is building up these troops. So far, still no response, even after the deadline has passed. Ukraine has also sent a similar request as to why these troops are being built up. Again, no response to that request. That's the reality. That is the reality here. This is the crazy problem. This is the crazy problem that we're seeing with people on the left, and Russell Brand here is literally deploying the exact same logic of a conspiracy theorist. It is absolutely insane to see, but that is what he is deploying.
That American officials are deploying in the situation with Ukraine is a familiar one. An underdog faces a threat from an authoritarian regime, so the United States must come to the rescue with a military response. They're all.
So what? We just pull back then and let Russia invade Ukraine? What?
Always doing that one. It's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but this time, Ant-Man. But this time, everybody's Russian. In a crisis, the American public is often discouraged from asking questions. And when they do, militarism is usually the answer. What's the alternative? Asked retired Brigadier General and former defense attaché to Moscow, Peter Zwack, in an interview on NPR. He's hardly an unbiased source. Whether it's my time doing wars or benefiting financially from wars, I've learned one thing: wars. The choice being put forward is between military action or inaction. To opt for inaction is presented as an abandonment of Ukraine.
Which it is. Because if we do nothing and we were to not help Ukraine in any way, militarily, give it equipment or anything like that, it would be seen as an abandonment of Ukraine, which, by the way, would send very, very chilling warning signs to places like Finland, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, who, by the way, since 2014, have been constantly preparing their populace for a potential Russian invasion, and what should they do if there is a potential Russian invasion. Sends very bad warnings about parts of Poland, says very, very bad warnings about all these other places that are just happen to be on border with these people. It's going to be very, very bad for those people as well. Because if you abandon those people, then the potential is, hey, you abandon Ukraine when push came to shove, maybe we'll just, push for something a little bit more as well. Maybe we'll go after the Baltic states as well. After all, Putin also says that those are part of, Russia as well. So guess we'll have to give him the Baltic states as well. So if you're in chat and you're listening to, Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia, sorry, but they're about to you're about to become part of Russia again. Again, Russell Brand here is just giving such a dumb, wrong-headed take here on the situation. And unfortunately, many people on the left seem to agree with him because they've become so anti-war that even if war is performed or military action is performed by other countries, they are so afraid of having to maybe get their hands dirty and get involved.
We can't abandon Ukraine. Why do you care about the Ukraine all the time? No, I love I've always liked the Ukraine. I liked the Ukraine before it was fashionable. It's not radio, it. No, I've always liked them. See my Ukraine poster?
We are pro-Ukraine because in the West, we are pro-democracies. And democracies should be defended. If not, then you are saying that any country can just literally engage in imperialism. After all, Russell, if this is the case, should Britain just not go retake its former empire? That's literally what you were suggesting. You were saying that imperialism is a good thing and that big countries with big militaries just get to do what they want to smaller countries as and when they will. That is not how we should be wanting things to run. This is what Russell Brand is currently advocating for. Russell Brand will say that he's not an imperialist, but right now he is making a pro-imperialist argument.
pistol over there. Zwack's prescription is lethal weapons, specifically Javelin anti-tank missiles and Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. Admittedly, they sound cool, but it is terrifying. And
yeah, why shouldn't we give Ukraine these weapons? If Ukraine is really bad about really fearing about this, by the way, it's also not mentioning, by the way, that Ukraine has asked for these weapons. They're not, the US and the UK aren't forcing these shipments of weapons on Ukraine. Ukraine has asked for these weapons. Ukraine has asked for these weapons. It wants these weapons because it is so worried about a potential Russian invasion. And as we said before, companies that make arms profiting from war say it isn't so. This is like saying, that a chocolate company is profiting off fat people because fat people eat chocolate. How dare they profit off the obesity crisis that we are facing in this country? What? Home builders building homes? How dare these people profit off the of people being homeless and building homes to try and help solve a housing crisis that we are these arguments just make no sense. And again, Russell Brand loves to come from a philosophical aspect. No, in this case, we've got to talk about real world situations, and the situation is here. The situation is here that Ukraine has been surrounded on its borders, not only just with Russia, but a foreign country as well. And it is worried as to why these troops are there. It has asked the question and sent to Russia, hey, why have you got all these troops on our border? Russia hasn't sent a response. You notice in all of this, so far, he has not even acknowledged the fact and the presence of Russian troops.
the US is delivering. In just over a week, the US made 4 shipments of weapons to the Ukraine, a move that has US arms manufacturers anticipating soaring profits for their shareholders. Some of the largest weapons companies in the world, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, have been openly telling their investors that tensions between the countries are good for business. And General
shocking, Russian, weapons makers are going to profit from selling weapons. Shock horror. This should hardly be news of any way, shape, or form.
Dynamics, meanwhile, is boasting about the past returns the company has seen as a result of such disputes. Here we go again. Jeremy Scarhill, co-founder of The Intercept, wrote, retired Pentagon officials on the payroll of the defense industry are presented as experts. Yeah, that's what the tag should be. Retired Pentagon official on the payroll of the defense industry. They should tag them like that. Often with no disclosure of their financial conflicts of interest.
Again, shock horror. Weapons companies making profit from weapons. I know this is new information for you all, but don't be so shocked.
Misinformation, anyone? Is that misinformation? And once the shooting starts, mainstream pundits will drop any remaining pretense of journalistic integrity and begin openly cheerleading for the troops. There's a format, isn't there? There's a format to how this functions. First of all, obfuscation and confusion. Then necessity and inevitability. Then the requirement for our support. What, are you unpatriotic? Don't you?
Again, Russell, let's talk about reality, as you've just said there. What about all those Russian troops on the border? Gee, you're sure not saying anything about that.
You support the troops? Yeah, I do support the troops. Guess what form my support of the troops takes? Don't send them off to fight a war so that some people can make a profit. Then when they come home, don't provide them with the necessary healthcare that they require and neglect them and abandon them. That's my support.
I agree with his second point. Yes, we should be supporting them with, you know, healthcare and stuff like that. I fully agree with Russell on that point. But this is a complete denial of the reality on the ground and the current situation in Ukraine. This is a complete abject denial of the facts. As I keep on telling you, Russia is currently surrounded by US troops on 3 fronts. Why are those troops even there to begin with?
Support for the troops. My support for the troops doesn't sound as much like support for the weapons industry, so maybe that's misinformation. You only need to look at how the Democratic Party and its affiliates spent the year so far responding to anti-war and de-escalatory arguments. These initially didn't come from left-wing or even liberal lawmakers and pundits, but from the right side of the political spectrum. Have we gone through some looking glass? Have we gone through, am I in Wonderland right now? Because when I was a kid, I was told this: the right wing, they want wars. The left wing, they're for the people. Therefore, basically for the people.
You aren't certainly for the Ukrainian people at the moment here, Russell. You certainly aren't for them. You are egging on of literally abandoning Ukraine to essentially Russian aggression. What's the consequences of that? Probably it will be the annexation of certainly the Donbass and Luhansk regions in Lithuania, Ukraine. Getting my countries mixed up now. And as even worse, if that works, well, why not just start sponsoring other Russian separatist movements? And, you know, just take Ukraine that way, just piece by piece. Now, don't get me wrong, I am for, as we said at the beginning of this video, I am for a democratic and diplomatic solution to this. But currently, it doesn't appear to be on the table, doesn't appear to be on the cards. And like I say, with the very clear fact that Russia currently has pretty much surrounded Ukraine as best as it can. Again, Brand here is trashing the West for, again, trying to aid an ally while saying nothing about the reality of the situation on the ground or having a bad word to say about Russia. That is incredibly sus. Incredibly sus. Not only that, we've seen him delve into conspiratorial thinking. What to say on this? I'm generally lost for words on this. Is he going to actually say anything else about this? I'm just going to skip forwards this because, to be honest, we've been on so far, but to be honest, it's the exact same talking points again.
In a corporate machine, and our consciousness is like the fodder of this machine that just has to be molded for the desired outcomes. Right, it's war now. Right, it's and disloyalty charges sprinkled with the Bush Ukraine in the next day or two. Who knows? But what we can now tell for certain is that there are interests at play that would benefit from there being that war. And perhaps the reason we find it hard to understand the true reasons for there being that conflict is because
you mean true reason for that conflict mean that, you know, Putin wants to annex part of Ukraine so he can better supply Crimea from there? This is just so dumb. I have not seen a more dumber take on this than Russell Brand. And unfortunately, not only have you seen here, but you've even seen in chat today, many people simping for Russia. By the way, it looks like what's her face? Catherine, there we are. Catherine did a runner when challenged, say, hey, come on here. Didn't take the opportunity. It also looks like that didn't take the opportunity to come on and talk either. Says volumes about what they really think about their potential cause because they don't want to be challenged on it. So yeah, I've had enough of Brand here, to be honest. He's got nothing else to say except shock horror. Weapon companies benefit from selling weapons. Again, denying the reality of the situation on the ground between Ukraine and Russia is completely a disingenuous take on all of this. Brand here is on completely the wrong side here, and should they do a runner and abandon Ukraine, then what's to stop Russia doing this to other countries? After all, the NATO abandoned these other countries. It abandoned Ukraine, so might it abandon other countries? Might Russia just decide to do this with other countries as well? So, yeah, very, very, to be honest, depressing from we've seen from leftists today, not seeming to understand that the fact here that the second the US got involved in this, you can't do this, can't have all this stuff going on. There are elements on the left that would abandon the Ukraine to basic Russian imperialism and for Ukraine to become a satellite state of Russia. We cannot allow that. We should not allow that. We have to respect the democratic will of the Ukrainian people, who overwhelmingly do want to be, again, not only a part of NATO, but also want to be part of the European Economic Area. And they are making movements towards that. Again, Ukraine, not a perfect country, but it's getting better. And to just abandon Ukraine is an incredibly wrong response from the West. It's an incredibly wrong response from people on the left to just abandon Ukraine here. Hopefully, we won't have to talk about this again on another stream, because I've talked about this enough, and I feel like I've set out my position on here so very clearly, so very carefully on this. We had a talk with Ben, the conspiracy theorist, a couple of days ago. He backed off on all his positions the second he was challenged on this, and I've two more people in chat today. Are they still here? Yes, they are. You've had your offers, you've had your chance. Seemingly you haven't taken it. Again, quite suspicious, but there you go. That's the reality of the situation on the ground here. This is not looking good. I hope it de-escalates. And, I hope it doesn't come to war. But if we have to go to war to defend the democratic country that is Ukraine, I'd call that quite a just war. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel. Again, down below with the Patreon page or the one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching. And hopefully we'll see you all next time. Like I say, we've got some more videos coming out this week. And of hope, of course, fingers crossed, of course, we are currently in the middle of yet another storm. So that may, again, unfortunately, force us indoors for another indoor good morning walk. But hey, there you go. So again, as always, hopefully see you all again soon. And as always, be safe, be sensible, and, support Ukraine in this. Because if not, you're blatantly supporting Russian imperialism.